Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I am ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy today, because today we are recapping House of the Dragon. Season 1 has just wrapped with episode 10. I believe it was called The Black Queen. That episode aired just last night, and here we are on Monday afternoon recording the episode. Probably release it the next day. We'll see how fast I can edit, but we are hot off of the release of this episode. We have not talked about the last half of these episodes, right? So wasn't the last time we talked about the early years?
Yeah, our last episode on House of the Dragon was that remembering the early years, about pre-time skip and all the recasting. So, I mean, we have episodes on the first and second episodes of House of the Dragon, and then we have the Remembering the Early Years. So I imagine this one we're going to be more focused on the later years, but we'll try to take a bird's eye view of the whole season and discuss our thoughts. And Charles, you and we haven't discussed the most recent episode. We've just had a couple text exchanges really about previous episodes, so I think this should be a relatively fresh discussion.
I agree. This is curious to hear some of your thoughts, Dylan. I had read a tweet you'd put out earlier, so I kind of know your overall feelings, and I think we share those feelings. But do we need a spoiler warning at this point, you think? We may as well give one. Anyway. Yeah, we may as well.
Right. So if you haven't yet watched the entirety of Season 1 of House of the Dragon, then we're going to be spoiling all of it, or at least we're not going to hold back when it comes to spoilers with all that first season. We won't be getting into the book stuff. We haven't read the books, so you're safe when it comes to that. But yes, if you haven't yet watched the first season of House of the Dragon, now's probably a good time to go watch it. A great season. And turn this down in your headphones before you do, because you don't want to get all those awesome events spoiled for you.
Well said, Dylan. And now here we are at the end. There was so much speculation leading up to the release of the show. It's like, is it going to be good? Do people even want more Game of Thrones universe content? Was season 8 of Game of Thrones just that bad that we could never love another Game of Thrones thing ever again? And I think we can both confidently say that yes, we can. There's plenty of room in our hearts. There isn't enough to fill that room of love for this new show, House of the Dragon, and just the whole Game of Thrones universe just feels so exciting and alive again. And I'm super happy to get into the meat of our discussion of the episode.
Yes, we can say that we're ready to love the Game of Thrones universe again, and so can 20 some odd million people per episode, I believe.
I know, it's insane. It's like
right.
no contest that everyone is just back and ready for this.
Right. And can I note, Charles, the listeners can't see this, but you're wearing black. And I'm wearing green.
Oh my god!
So we do have a greens versus black situation playing out here, right in front of us.
It wasn't until you just said that, Dylan, but I see it now, and it's totally true. I mean, do you know what color the High Towers light their lanterns when they call their bannermen to war, Dylan?
Jeez, that's going to be a tough one. It was only explicitly explained to me like 3 times over the course of watching House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
But it's got to be either black or green here, because that's what led us to this discussion. And I'm just going to say green, final answer, Charles.
And your answer is correct. That is right, as confirmed by Lair Strong. That is indeed the color that the High Towers light their whatevers when they're calling their banners to war. It is green. And and that was prophetic, if you will, because now there's an actual war started here. It seems like it's hard to just kill one of your enemy's kids and not expect a war to kind of follow after that. So here we are. We're blacks versus greens. I'm wearing black. You're wearing green. And we're in it. I'm wondering, let's just get some fun questions going because this just came into my head. Do you find yourself siding with the greens or the blacks any ways in particular? Or if you had to pick a side? I mean, you're House Baratheon, okay? They're both Kamanuya right now. Which one do you pick? Okay. You know, you've got both courting. I was
being placed in a hypothetical. Well, who's going to marry my daughters, Charles? That's what I want to know.
That is true. The Hightowers know how to negotiate deals, but let's just take the deals off the table, and now you have to choose which side you're going to have to align yourself with here. Do you find yourself leaning a particular way at this point?
I do slightly lean toward the blacks, just because I'm in a place with Otto Hightower where I'm like, get this guy out of here. He's great acting, by Fantastic. The way, and just phenomenal character writing. I think some of the best scenes include him, but he is just a snake. I didn't realize it'd be this intense with his ambition at the start of the show. I thought he would be one of the good guys, but lean slightly toward the ambitiousness. But this guy, he reminds me of Littlefinger in the sense of his sheer ruthlessness toward getting what he wants. Maybe Tywin is actually a better comparison because I think he does care about family and legacy and those kind of things instead of just himself. Mm-hmm. But he's up there with those kind of characters who are so ambitious that we have to say that they're, if not evil, then they're part of the bad guys. I do.
You almost compare him to Tywin sometimes. I'm like, how does Tywin is more overtly evil and he's done a lot more evil stuff. What I like about Hightower 1, his presence is always incredible, but you almost kind of buy into the fact that he's this level-headed, what's the right thing to do and let's do that. What's the logical, practical thing to do and let's do that. But then the more of the actions that he does, the more you're like, oh, he really is just, grabbing for power at a certain point. Because for a while you're like, oh, he's a level-headed guy. He's telling Alicent you either beg for mercy or you fight her. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, okay, that's, at least he's given her the option. But then it's like he never planned for her to make the choice to beg for forgiveness for Rhaenyra. He always planned for this war to happen. So it's interesting to see his actions kind of speak differently than his presence sometimes. I've enjoyed watching that.
Well said, Charles. He definitely gives off a lot of those Tywin vibes, and we see him for what he is when Viserys dies, and unbeknownst to the reigning queen here, Alicent, he's just set up this whole coup that's going to take place where they're going to put Aegon on the throne. So it wouldn't have even mattered the whole mix-up with Alicent hearing the Song of Ice and Fire thing, which, by the way, for me, the least interesting part of this entire season from our first discussion after episode 1 is this, a Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. Right. I just wish we could let it go. But anyway, when she mishears or misunderstands Viserys when he's saying his last words and trying to get across to Rhaenyra is who he thought he was talking to, that A Song of Ice and Fire thing is probably true, and Aegon and blah blah blah, Prince was promised, and she's like, wait, what? Are you saying that Aegon, my son, is definitely supposed to be the next king, and for some reason this is your babblings at the end of your life when you're on Milk of the Poppy is extremely important for me to take very seriously to the point of war?
I remember texting you. I was like, if this becomes a thing, I'm just going to roll my eyes. I texted you that. I was like, there's no way they should build this up as anything of substance.
But it didn't matter.
Right.
Because Otto was going to put it into place anyway. And I think that was the most telling moment where he's going to do whatever it takes in that Tywin kind of way. I think he's got a more, I guess, he has more restraint in his demeanor than Tywin. Tywin's a lot more, or was a lot more willing to just fully own that he is this force of a person who is willing to do whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. And Otto likes to play, like you were saying, like he's this level-headed, pragmatic guy. Just even the way that he showed up to Dragonstone in this most recent episode, the last episode, and he's just like, hey, I've got some really fair terms. And you almost buy into it, even though you know that he's just doing what he has to do, because I guess it was because in episode 9, Alicent was able to get to Aegon first, which, by the way, also I don't think was the strongest.
That whole segment was bizarre. Yeah. And interestingly enough, Alicent's terms were different than what Otto's terms were when he finally went to Rhaenyra and Daemon, because Alicent was like, they need to be banished. They can't be here still. And he was like, oh, I'll go give the terms. And it's like, why is Otto going to give the terms in Dragonstone? You know, I was kind of scratching my head at that a little bit. Like, I don't know. But even the fact that
Alicent or Aegon. So I guess they just... Part of it is like, let's throw a person that, you know, is a good actor and a good character. Yeah. I think that's a place where the, like, writing of a TV show and making an entertaining product took precedence over what would be the most logical move for the Hightowers.
Right. But
yeah, go on.
I mean, it was fair terms, right? It's like basically continue as you are now with everything that you currently have, and just acknowledge me as king is kind of the terms. I mean, he didn't throw in things like your legitimate children and this and that, but in all circumstances, not horrible terms. And that's what's got me like thinking about the Greens here. It's like if Viserys was able to keep his house in order, like this whole debacle should have not happened a long time ago. And also Rhaenyra, like, I don't know what she was expecting. Like, the day Viserys dies and she's not there in King's Landing, what she thought was going to happen. Like, it wasn't that surprising to me that they immediately just crowned Aegon, unless the moment Viserys died and didn't tell her. Because obviously that's what you would do. I can't blame Otto Hightower for being a snake in those moments, but it's all the stuff leading up to it. And like you said, just the fact that his presence there, like negotiating terms with air quotes, it's like he sounds so fair and reasonable, but he's really just like preparing for war already. He's already sending out people and pulling in allies and this and that. So yeah, it is an interesting character, and a pretty good scene overall with Otto Hightower on the side against Rhaenyra and Daemon discussing terms. I like that scene quite a bit.
Yeah, and the bookends, the parallel from, I guess it was actually episode 2, if I'm remembering correctly. So I don't know if it's fair to call it bookends if it wasn't episode 1 where Otto first flew in. Right. Or not flew in. Where Otto first...
stood on that bridge.
Stood on the bridge and Rhaenyra flew in. But we have, this time, Rhaenyra's on Daemon's side, or really Daemon's on Rhaenyra's side.
Right.
But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, Rhaenyra's on an
episode
opposite.
2, Rhaenyra was on Otto's side, and these interesting parallel scenes that I think the show does that pretty well a few times, and this is one of them. And I appreciate that. I appreciate Otto. I guess he's just doing what the king, which really was Alicent, came to there. I don't know. I don't sympathize too much with the Greens in part 2 because Aegon is such a garbage person that it's like you can't justify... I don't know. You can't justify, if you're Alicent, wanting to put him on the throne over someone who...
The Blacks have the it factor for sure. The Blacks have the it factor. You got to give them that.
Well, they have the they have the only person who might make an actual decent queen, followed by the only person who might actually make a half decent king in the line of succession, which is Jace. Not that he's shown so many amazing characteristics or whatever, but he seems like a half decent person. And then we take a look at the Greens and who they're trotting out there as king. It's a person who's a literal rapist and is just horrible, right? He's involved in betting on these fighting rings. Even he is screaming, "I'm not suited," which is the only time I've ever agreed with him. He's horrible. And you know who else is horrible is the person who'd be next up in Aemond. He's just a bad person too, for a lot of reasons. We'll get into more of those for sure. And then there's no one worthwhile for being on the throne except maybe actually Alicent, and she's shown no inclination to try to get herself on the throne, even despite what Rhaenys, the queen who never was, told her in episode 9 about, hey, if you really want to be free, you gotta start prioritizing yourself and trying to get yourself on there. I don't know. The Blacks, I just don't see a future. The Greens, I don't see a future that is anywhere decent for the realm with them in charge, given just the personnel, Charles.
Yeah.
Personnel.
There is a big personnel problem with the Hightowers and the Greens, that's for sure. The Blacks definitely have a lot more pizzazz, and I would agree completely. And it's hard to choose, and I think that's what makes the conflict so good. It's like, because on Rhaenyra's side, like, she has these obviously illegitimate children, and then there's the whole theme of, you know, sexism that prevails in Westeros, and that's kind of an interesting lens to look to too. You have most people being like, okay, she's had 2 husbands, she's had children that clearly are not from her relationships. Meanwhile, you have Aemon, who's a literal Aegon, who's a literal rapist, and no one cares, and they all cheer. So she's fighting those standards. So it's kind of interesting to see how that plays out too, and how just by being a woman and having all these men try and rule stuff around you, the conflict gets a lot more cloudy, because Alicent and Rhaenyra are friends, and they did make that effort. Alicent presented the page to Rhaenyra of remember when we were friends, and Rhaenyra was genuinely trying to negotiate. She was genuinely open to negotiating terms, I would say. I don't think she ever entertained accepting them, but she was like, well, maybe there is an agreement we can come to, which is, a very noble thing to do, for sure. And it's everyone around them is pushing for war. You have Daemon, and that whole council wanted to go to war. Otto Hightower's already got the whole small council plan to go to war, so it's I don't know, this world is a bit bloodthirsty, and we've seen that from the beginning, where people just killing themselves over nothing, minor disputes, and they're stabbing each other in the hall. So it's bound to happen in a way, I guess, and there's no real great answer here for the conflict. But I don't know, it seems like we're leaning towards the Blacks a little bit, but either way, it's gonna be messy.
Yeah, there's a part of me that's no one's really a good person here anymore, but I think you gotta put respect on Rhaenyra's name, like you were saying, for her restraint and being willing to consider the terms. And she's actually, they described her after the episodes as her father's daughter at times, because she's thinking about, okay, how can I actually keep the realm at peace here? How can I do what's best for them? And maybe that's actually more important than the fact that my butt is on the
King of Ashes and Bones, or whatever, Queen of Ashes and Bones.
Yes, which is a little, I don't know, I like that as, I don't know if it's an explicit callback to what they say in the original Game of Thrones about Littlefinger, where it's they say it's like he would burn the realm to the ground if he could be king of the ashes. It's like you don't want to be like that.
No,
So
or
I
even like a
understand.
Daenerys who she brought dragons to King's Landing and like just killed a bunch of innocent people. So that's the kind of path that Rhaenyra was trying to avoid. She even said like, because her whole council was like, we just bring all our dragons to King's Landing right now and we light them up. And she's like, that's going to absolutely devastate the realm. We cannot do that. And props to her. That's a very regal thing to like put your foot down on and be like, what's like we can't pay that cost. What? So I can be queen? Like I'm not going to pay that cost just so I can be the one in charge. You know, it just doesn't. It's just not fair to the realm, which is a very noble thing to do. Otto Hightower, I don't know if he would ever make that same choice, but there we are.
Yeah, I don't think he would ever make that same choice either. But Rhaenyra's not going to make that choice now. We feel pretty confident in that.
Mm-hmm.
You alluded to the reason why earlier, which is the death of her second born son.
Luke.
That's Luke, they call him.
Viserys.
And let's talk some about that scene, because to me, that brought the finale up to a whole nother notch. I love the way it was filmed. I love the route that they went. And I also love the nuance. We'll get into all this more. The nuance in terms of actually the way it played out was accidental. Right. It starts and there's actually Aemon. It'd be so easy to play him as a complete evil person, and he is a villain. I agree with that. But the way it plays out, there's actual history between those two in particular, and reason why Aemon would be pretty pissed off at Luke. And then you also get the fact that they both lost control of their dragons, which differs from not that I've read the book, but I have I was reading up a little bit on some of the differences, and one of those is it's not specified what exactly played out in terms of the that fight. So you don't know if there were any losing control of the dragon instances if you read the book, and you kind of assume there probably wasn't if you don't have any reason to. So I love how all of that played out. Charles.
That's well said, because Aemon, like you even heard him be like, no, stop, or whatever, and even Luke was like, like, what are you doing? Like, let's get out of here. So you could tell they were losing control. And I had read that too. I haven't actually read Fire and Blood, but I do know that Aemon Targaryen like just kind of owns that he did it. Like, oh yeah, I killed Luke. That was all me. And in the show, you kind of get the sense that, because the book is written like by historians, like that's the like historians marking down the history. So from factually, there was a fight. Aemon like was alive and Luke died. Aemon killed Luke, kind of a thing. But it could be possible that it played out like the show did, in that it was an accident, and now Aemon is faced with two choices. Like, do I go home and say, it was an accident, I didn't mean to, I lost control? Or do you say, well...
Which doesn't seem like what he did.
No, or be like, you know what, it was an accident, but I have to own it now, because there's no going back from it, so I am going to own it. I've got the eye patch already, so this is just my villain story, and own it. And I think that's kind of what they're going to, of like, yeah, he's going to go home and be like, oh, I killed him. He was weak. My dragon was like 20 times bigger. So it was one chomp, and we're that much closer to victory. And it's like, ooh. I would probably do the same thing in Aemon's shoes at this point. I wouldn't be like, it was an accident, I'm sorry. Because what good does that get you? Get you nowhere. Whereas at least owning up to it and being like, yeah, I killed him. Not a good look, but it's a better look, I think, than just being like a child who made a mistake. And that's what I want to talk about. Like these kids and these dragons, it's like you really just gotta, when kids get like this, you just gotta blame the parents, man. This is just bad upbringing. Immediately when Rhaenyra sent both of her sons away, I'm like, oh, they're dead. Like, this is a horrible idea. I would have never like okayed this, especially Luke is so small. He looks like a little kid. And then if I was Luke and I landed and I saw that big ass dragon, I would just immediately turn
like,
around.
Get out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was like screaming at the TV. I was like, dude, get out of here. Just hop back on the dragon.
That's
and
what
go.
I would have
I'm
done
glad.
immediately.
Yeah.
I'd be like, see ya. This is not working out. But, he tries to put a brave face on and he goes in and, oh yeah, like, immediately when all that was happening, I was like, he doesn't stand a chance. Never did. And that goes to show you kind of like the naivete of Rhaenyra's like reign right now. She thinks the Baratheons are gonna come to call because like the father was loyal, and we remember the father from like the jousting match, who was all over Princess Rhaenyra and like the queen that never was or whatever. That was the dad, Rhaenys. That was the dad of this Baratheon character. His name escapes me, but it's like he died, and now the son's ruling, and he's like, "You're offering me nothing? Like, what are you talking about? Why would I ever support you?" And it makes sense that he then turned him away. But now you have these kids who just have these dragons, and it speaks to like where this realm is as a society, just in general. It's like they've got more pent up like aggression and power than they know what to do with, and they're just like letting that violence just kind of overflows, and people just die in skirmishes all the time in this version of Westeros in this time period. And I genuinely do believe that this was an accident between two people that just lost control of their dragons, but they're kids, man. And shame on the parents for sending their kids out there. It's like, who gets their 16-year-old, like, oh, you got your license? Here's a tank. Have fun in school, honey. And then be surprised that, like, he blew up another kid or something. It's like, yeah, you just gave him a tank and unchecked privileges to just go out and do whatever they want. Of course, someone's going to lose an eye. Someone's going to lose their life. It just happens. So, well built up. I do think, like, it's honestly portrayed within the world. It's just such a shame that, like, this parenting has gone astray here, and that these dragons have run wild, and now you send one of your only kids off and they just get killed. It was a risky move. If I was Rhaenyra, I would have never ever done that. Like, maybe if this was a world where your opponent didn't have any dragons, then yeah, dragons speak volumes. But when they have a lot of dragons too, I wouldn't be flying out so quick to anywhere. I'd be like, we need to know where the dragons are. Like, we can't just fly out somewhere unguarded. So that was my reaction.
Yeah, I felt similarly. It was bad luck too, that it was the same exact time, and that it was Luke and Aemon, because obviously there's the history between those two in particular, where Luke cut Aemon's eye open, and Aemon, I guess, now threw some gem in there. That was
some blue crystal thing in there.
Yeah, but and on top of that, he's remembering when Alicent, his mom, was demanding Luke's eye from the whole thing. So he's calling back to that explicitly when they're in Storm's End. The current Lord Baratheon is like, okay, you're not doing that in my place. You got to get out of here.
Which at least he had the decency to do that.
Right. And then it's this moment where Aemon wants to
chase after,
just carry on the torment and the bullying, kind of get back. And even like there's a history where Luke used to be part, he was very young obviously, but be part of this bullying that Aegon, Jason, Luke used to do to Aemon. They brought out the pig and like dressed up like a dragon because Aemon was the one person who doesn't have a dragon. So it's this whole thing of like, oh, remember when you used to do that to me? And I hate you because you messed up my eye. Like, oh, who doesn't have oh, I don't have a dragon? I have the biggest freaking dragon, and I'm just going to torture you with it. And can we talk about how this scene was shot? Because when he's flying through the storm, obviously this is Storm's End and the storm lands, right? So we're not shocked that we have this storm going on around the Baratheon's keep. And you see on his little young dragon, you see
he's like looking
Luke
over his shoulder,
flying. Yeah, he's like, I'm just trying to get his dragon through the storm. And then there's that moment where it's like when you see in like a Jaws movie, right? Just like the shark underneath the water, the shadow of it, it's huge. It's like that moment plays out, except it's above Luke and that giant dragon. And
Sick.
that moment, right? It's like in the flash of lightning, and it's like that moment is so cool. And the
Excellent.
scene looked amazing. The chase is so much, I don't know if fun's the right word, but it's so entertaining. And finally, it seems like Luke is going to get away, right? He gets out into that open air, and then Vagar with just the chomp,
Oh,
right?
the
I saw
chomp
one
was
article,
good.
they called it like the chomp herd round the world, is what they called it. And
That's
it's just
funny.
like this, yeah, the choice too, to do that instead of to do like fire or something like that is so much cooler, I
Hmm.
feel like, because it's just, it, I don't know, it hits so hard.
And it
We've
was
seen so many people
quiet
burn to
and
death in Game of
still. Yeah,
Thrones,
yeah, yeah.
and then just right? And you just see the parts of the dragon. It's like this dragon just literally bit down on another dragon and just chomped it into pieces. And it's just like falling down into the ocean. And it's just like a memorable moment
Yeah.
right there. And to kill a kid,
Yeah.
like he's the youngest kind of like main
A
character,
prince,
main
too,
lead,
and a
a
relative, which
prince.
is an extra big no no in Westeros to kill your kin.
I mean, they're all kind of related at this point.
Especially the
It's tough out
Targaryens,
there.
but they
They're
probably had
very
the least
related.
amount of like familiar blood than anyone though. But yeah, it was impactful and it was a good way to do it. I knew I would have bet and I would have taken any odds to bet that he was a dead man. As the minute they flew those kids out, I'm like they're dead. And it was like you said, like the perfect matchup too, right? Because I've been watching Aemond. There's parts about Aemon that impressed me, and then parts of me that like this guy's unhinged. I thought the performance of the
Yeah,
older Aemon has been really good. Maybe a little over the top at times, but it's just fun, and I'm
I
okay with
like it.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like when it's over the
I
top.
like it. I like. God forbid this show's fun, you know. So I'm all about it, and yeah, it's like he just totally outclasses Luke in every way too. He's like way taller, like way more sophisticated in his, more eloquent in his speech. He's got the bigger dragon. It's like this kid did not stand a chance. And they try and make you think, "Oh, I broke through the storm." I'm like, "No, he's dead. Like I guarantee you, he's gonna get killed right here." And yeah, be eaten to pieces, eaten to pieces. And I don't feel very confident about Jace either. I mean, we'll see. He's going to see the Starks. That's exciting.
Yeah,
I don't think the
I
Starks
bought
will
in when
try
they were like,
anything
"There's
yet.
never a Stark that like has broken an oath." I'm like, I think they will portray the Starks as honorable. I was not trusting the Baratheon thing. I'm like, Baratheons are wild cards.
Yeah,
It's like they're like, oh, he's a very proud man, and that's why you're going to receive a great welcome. It's like proud is not really a reliable characteristic or a
yeah,
positive one.
yeah.
It's he's that means he's likely to do whatever best serves him, and I think whatever best makes him look big. And in this case, he was brought better terms from the high towers,
Right.
and
I mean,
yeah,
I
he
can't
didn't
say I
really protect.
blame him too much. It's like, what, I'm going to keep the oath of my father when this guy's already crowned king and offering me a marriage proposal, and like you're like 12 years old. It's like, get out of here, dude. Like, get out of here.
Just would be nice if I was just thinking it'd be nice if so Luke left, and obviously it didn't take too long before Aemon was out of there too, right? He must have followed right after because Aemon caught up pretty quick.
Right.
And so when you see, okay, we just let Luke go. He came here as a messenger, right? There's all these like house rights or whatever,
Right.
like guest rights, sorry, where you're supposed to protect the people who enter your hall. It'd just be nice if they just threw a few of those armed guardsmen in front of Aemon and they're like, you're not leaving right now. Like,
I
give
mean,
him
what
some
can
time.
you
Because you
do?
had to
He's
see
a
that coming.
princeling and he's got the biggest dragon in the world. Like, what are you gonna say no to him?
Yeah, but he's not on the dragon. I just think, there's a way to put a few people in front of him without
I think
completely
when
ending
you
the
show up
relationship.
with the biggest dragon in the world, it kind of brings all the good faith out of your negotiations. It's like, are you going to hold me back? Are you going to tell me no? Because I can say the words Dracarys and kill everyone in here, like in 2 seconds. This is the biggest dragon in the world we're talking about. I wouldn't say no to him, that's for sure. I'd be like, see you later. I hope you guys kill each other out there in the storm. Like, please do. Because I don't want to deal with either of you.
I get that. It's just the Starks would have handled it.
And also, he's trying to get one of his daughters married to Aemon. So
I think that was already in the terms. So I think he already had that secured. And I also think that the High Towers, they're not gonna, over something as small as them kind of putting a blockade to keep Aemon from running out there and hopping on dragon and all that. It's like, I don't think that's going to ruin their terms. I need the Baratheons on their side. But I see your point, Charles. In the moment, I
don't know how you're going to stop
that
Aemon
risk for
if
someone
he wants
who
to go. He's also a very accomplished fighter too. We've seen that.
Right, but he was outnumbered. There were so many guards there.
I don't know.
He's
got the
agree to
biggest
disagree
dragon in the world.
Right outside. He's not on the dragon at that moment. I'm saying he's in the hall. The guards are in the hall too. You just throw them in front of him. But agree to disagree, because arguing about what Baratheon should do probably already has received way more attention in this episode than it deserves. It's like watch 10 episodes and we spent like 5 minutes of an episode on the whole season. That's probably gonna be like 60 minutes talking about what should this minor character do. But anyway, let's talk. I like the nuance. We talked about this a little bit, right? You get the moment where oh God, I'm gonna blank on the dragon name, like Arrax or something.
The name of who?
The little dragon.
Oh, Luke's dragon. I have no idea.
Yeah, look it up while I'm talking.
Okay, yeah, we'll look it up.
We'll get it right. So, that one is it's like freaking out, and it ends up like blowing some fire into Vhagar's face, and that's where things went awry. Arrax?
Arrax.
Did I get that right? Mm. Okay. Arrax. So ends up blowing some fire into Vhagar's face, and from that point on, just both of them do not have control over their dragons.
Well, I think the fire was unintended too.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. He's like, yeah, that was unintended, and then of course the chomp was unintended, and I just think that's something that this season has kind of tried to lean toward, and this was a great success in this moment, because you get the like, oh wow, Aemon, like this kind of crap just happens and things go awry, and these huge moments in history hinge on these human failures, basically, right? And we talk about that. Our Joe Abercrombie, one of our favorite authors who's on the show, we talk about how in his books, some of what works really well is he does these moments where humans just being humans and making mistakes.
Right.
And Game of Thrones does this really well too. That's what history often turns on. Right. And in this moment, just the human urge to kind of torment the guy who tormented him in the past, Aemon ends up sending them all into war, and we get a more complex character out of Aemon in this moment. Rather than just the cartoonish villain. So that. Yeah. And we also get this moment where even if it wasn't intended, we're going to have a war here. And I absolutely love the way that they played that.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the systematic problems in this society, like in this age, are portrayed really well in the show. They spent a lot of time showing the different layers some more blatant than others of like, okay, look, there's misogyny, there's also a bit of soft-spokenness from our leader, there's also a little bit of this like tendency towards violence, and you have the kids who are kind of raised to not really get along, and then you give them these powerful nuclear bombs and they use them against each other and hurt each other by accident and kill each other. It's well placed and well handled, and you see it from different perspectives. Like you have Rhaenyra, you have Alicent, and you even have Rhaenys, who are all kind of have these very similar shared experiences, and you think that would kind of bring them together in camaraderie, but it only kind of puts them at odds with each other. They can recognize things in each other and respect each other and be friends every once in a while, but they are all at odds, and it's interesting to see all of that play out across the whole show. And there were a lot of payoffs in the last episode and the episode before it, because I feel like 9 and 10 are kind of two halves of a whole idea here, where you have the Hightower episode and you have the Targaryen episode. So I kind of see them as one sometimes, and you get a lot of payoff in those two episodes. I like once Viserys is dead, it just kicks everything off, and all of this has been brooding, and you see how unavoidable it really was. Like everyone is so far down already, and the fact that they were even able to sit down and have dinner in a somewhat civil manner for about a second in episode 8 was like an incredible feat. That's like all of Viserys' will was to have them have one nice moment in one dinner. Like that's all he was really able to achieve. It was all so broken, and just to watch it all finally come to a head, it just took this what was accidental but irreversible move of killing one of the sons. So yeah, fantastic ending to the season for sure. You need to go out with something heavy, and I thought they balanced it well. Like it was shocking, it was exciting. Like all of these Targaryen characters are just so unpredictable. Like still can't get a read on Daemon. Like he's choking out Rhaenyra like moments before is wild. And as much as that scene was like unseemly, obviously Daemon is not a good person at all. Killed his last wife with a rock, and now he's got Rhaenyra by the throat. At least the only thing I was able to kind of understand was she was talking about the freaking prophecy. It's like, okay, enough with the prophecy.
Sometimes when people talk about prophecy, I kind of want to choke them out too.
Exactly.
It's just, yeah.
I was like, I kind of see where Damon's coming from. Still not cool though.
Domestic violence, never okay.
Never okay. But she was talking about the prophecy. It is annoying when
people talk about the prophecy. And obviously the thing it's supposed to mean in the show isn't just him being annoyed that this bad story element is coming up again, but the idea that even when Daemon was technically the heir, Viserys did not trust him enough to provide him with that information, and kind of always knew that Daemon was not going to be his successor if he had anything to say about it. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. They're wild cards. Only Targaryen who seem to have it together mentally, like didn't have this streak of fire and blood in him really, was Viserys, and he was the only thing. Just their mutual, I don't know if respect is the best word, but like of Viserys as a person and not wanting to make his life worse was what kept this family together. And we should, since we haven't talked about it all on the show yet, we should talk episode 8, because that's my favorite episode this season. Still
the best episode of the season.
Is the Viserys, yes. Agreed. Yeah. The Viserys episode, really. His curtain call, and one of the best performances I feel like I've seen on any TV episode, period, by an actor. Considine was like out of this world. Like someone get this guy an Emmy, right?
For sure. No, he was excellent, and it made Viserys like one of my favorite characters. Like obviously his whole rule can be looked back on as kind of a whimper in the history books, but that's what kind of fascinates me about him, how his like struggle with mediocrity and his own incompetence, even though he meant well and all he wanted was to have a big happy family. It's just like, and he wanted to make Rhaenyra queen, like very progressive ideas and very wholesome guy. Just by sheer incompetence, he set up this huge catastrophic failure that is the Dance of Dragons, right? So for me, that balance is just super fascinating, and it's more interesting than a character who's like got obvious, like, you know, oh, you have obvious flaws, like you're mean to people, like that's not cool. Like he's actually a guy you like, even though he has failed. His failure is much more indirect and subtle. It's just so fascinating. And then his performance where he desperately tries to save it all. There's that moment where Rhaenyra is like at his bedside and it's like if you still want me to be queen, I need you to fight for me. And you see him doing everything an old person can do to try and preserve their dignity, and then like refusing pain medication to keep a clear head, trying to walk on your own, go upstairs on your own, bend over and pick something up on your own, host a dinner with your whole family. Like all of these things, it's heartbreaking. One, because of his story is kind of tragic and he's about to die, and two, just like getting old sucks, man. Getting old sucks.
Well, it's really the illness more than his age, because I believe he's 52 at the time of his death in the story. So he looks much older and he's so worn down. But you're right about that.
52 is old for this really kind of a setting.
No, 52 is not old. To our wonderful listeners.
It's not old in the modern age, but in the Game of Thrones world, that's old, bro. They're getting married at like 12.
Really, sure, but I don't really think their life expectancy is as low as like it was in the real Middle Ages and stuff, right? You've got all these guys like Maester
Hard
Pycelle,
to say, whereas this is an unbiased sample here of royalty. I mean, this is a biased sample of royalty.
Okay, true. But yes, you're right. But among the nobles and all that. Anyway, 52, not old, but, showing the kind of things that often happen as people reach the end of their life, and oftentimes people who are significantly older go through some of these things. And I don't know. I think it goes to show how, at its core, Game of Thrones is a show, or House of the Dragon too, the shows in this universe. They're shows about human, at times triumph, at times failure, but they're human stories and psychological stories underneath it all. There's dragons, there's in the old show there were White Walkers, there's magic that's taking place, but the scene that was most captivating for me in this entire season, with a show kind of about dragons in some ways, was a guy, an ill man, just overcoming his frailty to step up to a dais. That's what it's called. Dais. Okay, but a man stepping up to the stairs leading up to his throne, and then being able to do it by himself until another family member who he's had strife with then comes over, picks up the crown off the ground and helps him up, sits down, and then he gets crowned by his brother, who is someone who, they've had such a tumultuous relationship, and for his brother to finally be acknowledging like, hey, you're the king, by putting the crown on his head, just like all that moment for me was so emotionally overwhelming and captivating. I mean, nothing's gonna stick with me quite like that. I was like bawling, just tears flowing down my face. And
great performance from Damon too on there. Like it's a great scene, and I do think like this show can struggle sometimes with presenting its big heroic moments and its more nuanced symbolism and metaphors and stuff like that. But this was a scene they just thankfully let play out and let us like just take in the performance and what it means in the relationship with these characters without like a word being spoken. There was so much restraint in those moments. I mean, the crowning on his head was very obvious, but it was also very poignant and meaningful too, because that's a big gesture for Damon.
And also wasn't in the script, apparently.
Oh.
Did you hear that?
I did not hear that.
Did you not know? Oh, no. Yeah. So that seems like the type of thing that could be even a little bit too on the nose. Felt very writerly and metaphorical to have him crown his brother at the end. But that was actually something that happened where Paddy Considine, I believe is the actor's name, the crown fell off his head while he was going up, and the guy who plays Damon,
Matt Smith.
Oh God, Matt Smith. He ends up picking up the crown just because that's what happened. They play out the scene and they put it on his head.
So
and
the crown was not meant to fall off his head?
Not meant to fall.
Wow.
No, not meant to fall off his head, nor was it meant to then result in this moment where Matt Smith puts the crown on Viserys's head. That just kind of happened, and I don't think it was like that happened in that first take and then they were like, whoa, we should keep this take. I think it just happened at some point and then they're like, oh, wow, that's really good. Let's keep doing it that way.
I see.
And
so they shot it intentionally after that, but the inspiration for it came from shooting the scene a different way.
Right.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah. Like, it makes sense. And it's, although it's very obvious, I don't think it was heavy-handed or anything. Like, I really enjoyed that moment. Definitely, I agree with you, Dylan. One of the more powerful moments of the whole show. There's so many moments they tried to give us with certain characters that I was like, I'm not fully buying. I'm kind of referring to the Uranus moment that I don't whatever we'll about, but not
the Uranus moment at the end of episode 9 you're referring to.
Yeah.
Where she spares the greens. We'll
get into that, but I want to make sure Viserys gets his moment. It's like there's moments where it's like this is the big moment that feels kind of overblown or over delivered, but this was one of the best shot, recorded, like presented scenes of the whole show, and they just let these characters be themselves. They have amazing actors, and these characters now they've built up all these really rich interpersonal relationships. Like compared to Game of Thrones, this show is very nuclear. Like really small setting and cast here.
Nuclear, like nuclear family. Nuclear, not...
Well, I guess both, but I meant like nuclear and that the family's very close and tight-knit, and really only two settings, kind of King's Landing and Dragonstone. Really, they go to other places, but it's like in a side, like a really small... setting here, whereas Game of Thrones were like, we went to the Wall, and we went here, and we went there, and we went to West, and we were in Westeros, or we were in the North, and stand in where do the Starks live?
It's a whole other continent, right?
Yeah. So,
wait, you say, did you blank on Winterfell?
Yeah, Winterfell. Thank you. You know, I've actually been there in Northern Ireland. I've been to Winterfell, so I should know.
Wow.
But so. This show is way more restrained in all of that, and I think what you get then is a lot of these great payoffs later on of like they invested so much time in the complicated interpersonal relationships of these characters that they're so complex, and you have a scene where Daemon is choking out Rhaenyra and you're still kind of conflicted on the Daemon character after that. It's like, whoa, kind of speaks to how much we know about these characters, that we're not like that guy's just a straight up like crazy villain, which he is, but you can still empathize with him in certain moments. Like he can beat his wife in with a rock and then crown Viserys, and you still feel those different that full range of emotions with someone like that. Like it's a real achievement. It's a triumph, and it's something that a lot of TV shows are rarely able to pull off. It's not an easy thing to do, and the world that they created in the show, it's like, is incredible, and we get these brilliant moments like Viserys, I will sit the throne today kind of moments are that much more powerful for it.
Well said, Charles. And I think that, first of all, I want to say I totally agree about the complexity of Damon's character and how critical that's been to my enjoyment of the show.
Right.
They could so easily play him as a villain, or try to hype him up as a hero by not having all these horrible things that he's doing, I guess. But he's super complex, and they find that really incredible happy medium where
Yeah.
he
It's amazing.
can almost do anything and it feels in character.
He's very unpredictable.
That's really hard to do, right? Because his character is so rash and unpredictable. He's capable of almost anything, and then when you've got such an incredible actor playing the role who can do both sides of the coin, there, you just got a recipe for success. And speaking of that, the actors, I think part of what makes that moment so great, with all the casting changes and the time skips and all this stuff, I mean, you want to think you don't lose your attachment at all to characters like, let's say, Rhaenyra when we get a change, or Allison or whatever. But I think you do just a little bit when it's a new person on there.
Sure.
It's hard to put that aside completely. But Viserys and Daemon, we've had the same OG actors playing it all the way through. So the way that moment delivers is in part, I think, even stronger because of that. We have all that original attachment. We've seen them since episode 1 in a way that not exactly the same when you're seeing some of the other characters. Although the new cast has really grown on me.
Oh, they stepped up for sure. Like, I feel like the transition was really smooth. And my only problem is the young actors were so good I didn't want to lose them, and now the new actors are here and they're also good, so it's just complicated. Like, everyone's good. Like, can we all just be in a scene? Can we get?
I found it jarring a little bit at first.
It's not ideal
it's
as a fan of the show and the characters.
I've gotten used to them.
Yeah.
And learned to appreciate them more.
Within one season, within 5 episodes, it's like not that much time, and I think all of the overwhelming majority of fans of this show are kind of just are on board with it, and I think that's an accomplishment, because that could be seen as a very unpopular thing of we're going to recast our main characters 5 episodes in. Not the safest play at all. So, I mean, hats off to them. They took a risk and they were able to pull it off. And you're able to see the relationships of these characters go from a young age to an older age. Now they have kids themselves, so that was rewarding to see, because now you get the payoff of how did we go from playing in the garden talking about eating cakes to your kid killed my kid and we're at war now. It's a long way to go. So if I was in that writer's room, I'd be very nervous about recasting characters and aging up and time skips. I'd be like, this all sounds super complicated and risky, but they pulled it off. I don't think at any moment it was bad. I mean, I missed the old characters, but that's really the only complaint that I have about it. Everything else to me was fine and good. So kudos to them for that.
I agree, Charles. So we talked a little bit about the Rhaenys moment, and we'll talk a little bit maybe about just things in general this season that didn't work as well for us. I'm sure that'll be a much briefer conversation than the things that worked well. But
episode 9 for me was a little
You were
sloppy.
very critical of episode 9. Yeah, we had a little text exchange afterward, and you soured me on it a little bit. I came off episode 9 feeling really good, and then it was one of those things where you kind of started poking holes in some stuff, and I was like, yeah, I guess that's accurate, and then I just kind of leveled out with my hype on it. So if you want to bring those in, probably especially the Rhaenys moment.
So sure.
You also had a funny line about the Hitchcock thing.
Oh yeah, we need to get into all of that, so I'll be quick. But for me, I thought episode 9 started really strong, right? I love this concept of the king is dead. It's the twilight hours of the morning. Like, you're at the precipice of, do we take our moment and seize power now, knowing it will cause conflict? What needs to be done? And Otto Hightower did not miss a beat and kept it going. And I really enjoyed those moments in the small council where they've already been like, oh yeah, well, we've got these ships and these people will call to our banners and this and that. And that to me was excellent. But then there was this whole second thing of oh, where's Aegon? And then I just pictured Scooby-Doo, where the characters are running across all these different doors and different characters are running in and out and running past each other and into each other. You're like, what is this silliness of ooh, who's seen Aegon last? Whoever gets to him first controls the destiny of the realm, this, that, and the other. And it's I don't know, didn't really buy into it. And you have the whole child fighting ring, which makes Aegon look even worse. That's probably the main thing it does. It's wow, he has bastard children fighting in the ring and he's placing bets on it and this and that. But ultimately, who cares? They've got the twins with very similar names and it's okay, who cares about you? And I in the after the show, it's oh, throughout the season, they've been kind of disagreeing with each other. And I'm I've never seen these characters before in my life. And if I did, they were really not important. This to me is the first time.
I think they were only one of them was in the previous episode. And all that really happened was Allison is Sir Eric, come over here and do this thing. And he was I'm Eric, actually. It's okay.
Yeah, it's who cares? So that was weird. And the after the show for that, again, the after the show just finds a way to annoy me almost every time with these guys. I don't know what it is that I just can't calm down with them, but they don't add any value really. They just kind of explain the scene that we already saw. It's oh yeah, well, you could tell that Aemon accidentally lost control of the dragon and then now Luke died. It's yeah, I know, I just saw it. What else can you tell me about the show? And in this one, I remember he calls the episode Hitchcockian, and I was I'm wondering if he's ever seen a Hitchcock film and if he knows what Hitchcockian means. Yeah, it was kind of suspenseful a little bit, but for the most part, it was very a normal episode. A Hitchcock movie changes directions and it's shocking and suspenseful and totally unexpected. And this was nothing like that. So it was still good. I don't want to take I'm going to hate on the episode, but overall it was a very good episode. I just feel the standards have been raised so high for House of the Dragon that I feel I have to be extra critical in these moments. So it's dude, your show's not Hitchcockian, so get that word out of your vocabulary. The whole search for Aegon thing, who cares? And then we were talking, but you had a good point about what's her face negotiating with Otto Hightower, and she's I want you to end the child ring fighting. Yeah. And it's yeah, sure, I'll end child ring fighting. I don't give a crap. Yeah. You think I whatever. And then I'm watching this, I'm who cares about this lady character? Who cares about child cockfights? Nobody does. So I don't even know why we're trying to make this a thing in episode 9.
Talking Fantasy podcast, we are firmly against child cockfights.
I mean, yes, we are.
We do obviously care. We do care. But
together,
Charles not as strongly
for just 25
as
cents a day, you too can end child cockfighting. We need one of those Alison McLaughlin things with a dirty Targaryen orphan. It's I will remember you. It's this child was kicked out into the cold and sold to the child cockfight rings, the sad pet adoption commercials.
Yes, yeah. I know those. So anyway, the thing I was trying to say is she's talking the thing that you brought up that my point about the white worm thing is she's talking to the slimiest person in King's Landing in Otto Hightower and just relying on his word. She's I want your word that you're going to stop these child cockfights. And Otto Hightower is yeah, of course. You can trust me.
Yeah,
I'm old
where's the
reliable
kid?
Otto. Honest Otto, you know? When I was a kid, I chopped down a cherry tree. And I was like, I can't lie about this. It was like, this isn't exactly a paragon of moral virtue that you're
No.
talking to here. And so I don't know, the whole
But
motivation
whatever.
of
This
that
one of them
character and her
grabs him, and it's
involvement.
like, okay, fine. Like,
And her accent is borderline offensive to
I was like,
everyone.
oh, this accent isn't. It
Feels
sounds
off.
racist, but I know it's not. I'm just kind of like, if I talked like that, I'd get canceled. But she can talk like that, so it's like, it was one of those awkward. I was like, I don't care about this character at all. Throw her out. Like, cut that out of the episode. Don't need it. And then it ends, and then the producers also in the after the show. You got one more thing to say before we move on?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, go on. I'm like, you finish.
Oh, okay. So we have Rhaenys, right? We all know what happened. She breaks through the floor of King's Landing, and the the showrunners in the after the episode, like, this was her moment. We wanted to give her her moment. And I'm like, what? Who cares about this moment? Like, this is not an earned thing for Rhaenys, because it's totally undermined by the fact that she just killed at least 100 innocent lives. Like, she comes up from the
Right, she
floor
burst through the floor
of a crowded room. Of a
fall.
crowded, jam-packed. They were like, bring them all. I want all of King's Landing to see the coronation ceremony. They pack it to the gills, and she just comes up through the floor. Catastrophic loss of life. This is one of those, like, main massacre events led by Rhaenys Targaryen. It's like, this was her moment. She chose not to be violent in this moment. She chose to
She chose the
spare the
moral
High
thing.
Towers. It's like, what are you talking about? She threw her morality out the window when she killed a million people. At least Viserys, I think it was Viserys, or maybe it was Otto Hightower. Maybe you can remember, Dylan. There was this line of, like, power is given by the people, kind of a thing. It's like, power is this fickle thing that the people, like the common man, gives you. Basically, like,
We've had lines about that ranging back to Viserys with his whole, what did he say? It's like
water dragons.
Sorry, did I say? I'm trying to say Varys. Varys, where he's like, it's a mummer's trick. Back in the original Game of Thrones, he gives that whole speech to Tyrion about, it's like, oh, here's a riddle. There's three different people. It's like, who has the power? And he's like, it's a mummer's farce. Power, like, power resides where men believe it resides.
Right, exactly. And I think
Ranging back
Otto
to
was
Varys,
kind of
and
making
I'm
that
sure
case
it's-
to crown Aegon, but someone said it in that episode, which I think is important, because they're talking about, like, how, like, the common man is so important, and boom, right through the roof, through the floor, you just kill a bunch of people. Your dragon could end this fight before it even starts. Right now, with no additional loss of life than the catastrophic loss of life you've already just committed. It's like, what's stopping you from killing 4 more people? Like, what are you doing? So I don't know. And then she goes to Rhaenyra, and then she has, like, she's acting all coy all of episode 10 of, like, she's like in the background of all these shots, like, just kind of walking by staring, and it's like, why do they put her in focus just to, like, stare in the background? Like, obviously they show her not kneeling, which makes sense, but it got up to the point where she would come into focus in the background, and I would laugh, because it's just funny that they just kept showing her standing around, like, not doing anything. I mean, she's a great actress, but they did her a little dirty, showing her over and over and over and over again, to where she eventually sides with Rhaenyra, which I can't say that was the best choice. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But, like, if you're gonna side with Rhaenyra, like, what are you doing? Why are you messing around with the Hightowers and letting them go? Like, the whole thing was kind of messy to me, and I feel like we didn't really get too much of Rhaenyra character development. Like, we saw that the crown was robbed from her, and she was always kind of cold to Rhaenyra.
Rhaenys.
Yeah, Rhaenys was always kind of cold to Rhaenyra. So yeah, the Rhaenys arc, and to have her moment, the whole thing just kind of stumbled for me. The more I thought about it, the more I was like, what? Like, what was that episode? It was kind of a little messy, in my opinion. I don't know. Am I that off base?
I don't think you're that off base, Charles, and I I think where you're totally on base is this idea that presenting presenting it as this moral choice, which is what they did in the after the episode, but was not necessarily what it had to be based on the actual events that played out in the show, at least in episode 9, where she bursts through, she kills all these people, but it doesn't count because they don't have names.
Exactly.
Right, you can't find them credited anywhere on IMDb, so it doesn't count. And then it's moral because she spared the characters that do have names. I don't really buy into that. That doesn't make any sense. And it's this trope that I just kind of hate in general, which is I think about in like superhero comics or movies or whatever, where they're basically killing henchmen like it's nothing, and then they get to the main villain and they're like, no,
shaking over the killing blow, like
if I kill the mastermind behind all of this, who is a named character, it's not henchman number 2. If I kill that person, I'll be just as bad as them. And it's like, well, like, Henchman 2 might have had a family. Henchman 2's just trying to get an honest living. It's like, this person is a person. If anyone deserves it, it's this person.
Exactly.
And I think
we can't forget that Rhaenys is a mass murderer. This is a massacre of human life. Catastrophic loss of human life.
But
for no reason.
The way I took it when I first watched the episode, before the showrunners told me how to think, which they're really big into that.
Huge into that.
You're right. God forbid that I have my own thoughts. Everything needs to be explained explicitly what happened. They say, like, oh, it's this moral choice, and some people might disagree with it, but this is what you did. And for me, it was more just about the power move of it all, which is when I enjoyed it more, was when she just comes in and she's like, has the dragon roar at them. She's like, hey, I could have killed all of you, and I'm choosing not to. Peace.
Yeah, she's like, I can still wreck your stuff up, like, I'm right here in the middle of of the hall, right, in King's Landing. Like, this is what I'm capable of. This is what dragons, like the blood of the dragon, can do. Peace. Like, leave them shaking in their boots a little bit.
But yeah, and I'm thinking back to these moments where she's like, oh, Driftmark is going to need to stand alone and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, this is just her being like, I have the power to end you, but I won't because this ain't my fight. I'm out of here. And
so ridiculous.
I think that's a stronger way to play it if she actually went to Driftmark and was out of here. Yeah. Right? If she was actually fair. Like, hey, she retired. I'm going to isolate myself. Right. Well, I mean, that's actually what Corlys wanted to do in episode 10.
Yeah.
He was like,
but then Rhaenyra's like, oh, she stowed a stable head. We need to fight for her. It's like, what? Right. Says the person who let the High Towers go?
Goes the total other way. Right. Yeah, she goes the total other way, and that's why... And I kind of saw that, they're like, next time on House of the Dragon, Rhaenys sort of thinks about not being on Rhaenyra's side, but totally is on Rhaenyra's side. It's like you could tell that already.
It's like you grew up with Rhaenyra your whole life, Rhaenys. You knew what kind of person she was. That's like, I don't know. I mean, and granted, they are probably responsible for the death of all of her kids. So you think someone kills all your kids.
I mean, one of them, they just
died in childbirth.
Came up with a scheme, so... No, and one of them, they came up with a scheme where he could just leave and go live his best life. But
Rhaenys doesn't know that. Rhaenys thinks she's dead.
Yeah, she doesn't know that. Yeah, I know. And she, yeah.
It's like, so, my son is found dead and shoved in a campfire, and I'm not going to... And then immediately, the two, like, my niece and I don't know her relation to Daemon, they get married, like... Right? Cousin? Like, are you kidding me? So, yeah. She's got to be at least a little suspicious.
She should, yeah. And I think the reason it doesn't land is because she just goes and sides with Rhaenyra right after.
And then she tries and gives her reasoning of like, oh, she's so level-headed in that boardroom right now. I'm so impressed. It's like, what?
His
What?
boardroom.
Well, that's what I'm calling it.
Like an
Whatever.
office.
Their war room
Right.
where they're like at the table, like, let's go to war. And she's like, we'll listen to terms. And this is the person she's willing to go to war for. Like, I don't know. Eh.
Yeah. No, it's not. That's not the strongest moment for sure.
Right. I'm
I'm
being
with you. And
hyperbolic here. Like, it's fine presentation and all, but man, I think I've earned the right to be a little nitpicky here. The show's standards are so high that it's like, I don't know, to fall into that trope, like you said, Dylan, of like, I'll kill all these people and then show you mercy because I'm a good person. It's like, well, you did kill a lot of people. Let's be honest here. You're a murderer. You're a mass murderer.
yeah.
Horrible.
Agreed, Charles. Agreed.
Innocent lives too. At least Damon like fights soldiers and criminals and stuff, and the occasional wife or two, but not like hundreds of innocent people.
Yeah. No. Episode 9, not the strongest when you compare it. I think it's it's sandwiched between the two maybe strongest episodes of the whole season.
Yeah, that's fair.
So rough, just a tough sitch
Just
for
a tough
episode
sitch.
9, and especially on the heels of episode 8, which was just unbelievable. So, I mean, other things that kind of didn't work for me. The whole Kristen Cole thing,
Yeah, whatever on him.
it's not doing it for me. Not just I just like F Kristen Cole trying to keep our clean rating here on all your favorite podcast apps, but you know what I want to say about Kristen Cole. Don't like him as a person at all. He's just a horrible person. I mean, can we just say rest in peace to Lord Beesbury?
Oh yeah.
Who went out because he stood up in the middle of the Green Council and he was like, I actually am a loyal person, and Kristen Cole just walks up and just bangs his head. It's like an old dude.
So annoying, and like unforgivable from Kristen Cole too. It's like, how can you be that unhinged, bro, that you just murdered this guy? Like, maybe that was part of the plan the whole time. Like, whatever, but. Yeah, he's kind of like the anti-Jamie, where he starts a bit more idealistic and unravels, compared to Jamie, who starts unraveled and becomes a bit more idealistic. Like, they're still both horrible people through and through, but yeah, poor Beesbury for sure. All he was trying to do would be like, did we not forget that the king who just died wanted Rhaenyra to be queen? Like, what's the issue here? And that was a great line that Viserys said. He's like, why are we arguing about already settled secession? Or it's like, what is the issue here, guys? Like, Otto just keeps bringing this stuff up over and over and over. But it was funny. I was watching some like live chats and live streams and stuff talking about the finale, and people were putting the bee emoji in the chat. It's like bees in the chat, people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for Beesbury. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad people are. Because I was like, this is messed up.
If we were live streaming right now, I'd be all like, bees in the chat, people. Bees in the chat.
Bees in the chat. Yeah, bees in the chat for Beesbury. I'm glad he's getting the treatment that he deserves by the fan base, if not by Kristen Cole. And can we also, like, why is this like Kristen Cole's thing is at like I don't know, events that should be normal with no fighting. He just goes around bashing people's heads in with no consequences. Like
weirdly repressed.
Like, it's never, and it's never discussed how he got away with murdering poor Joffrey. And before the time skip, he just beats his head in, and it's never discussed why that was okay. And why no one brings that up anymore.
Yeah,
and
you think that
I'm like,
the Valerians would have taken issue with that. It's like, bro, you just murdered my guest in your own hall for doing nothing. Like, what is the issue here?
And also the guy doesn't age at all during any of this.
Quite the glow.
I understand he's not the only one who sort of doesn't age, like Damon, I think, as well, but at least he like changes his hairstyle. You get some sense that this guy, like, something's happening. If you looked at Kristen Cole every episode, it's like, this guy, has not changed a bit. So I'm just like anti Kristen Cole. That's my I don't like the guy. I don't like the way the character is being written, and Beesbury deserves justice.
Bees in the chat, people. I agree. I don't like Sir Kristen Cole one bit. He was always just kind of whiny and annoying, whether he was being like the cute boy toy or now he's being the edgelord, like weirdo, like incel guy. I don't know. It's just the vibes I get. Just like oh this.
Oh yeah. Well, he's like sexist, and then he does weird like. He dropped some words I can't say to maintain that clean rating on all of your favorite podcasting apps, but. He's dropped some of those about Rhaenyra, like first episode after the time skip, and then Aemond is saying something about about women when they're searching for Aegon, and he's like, all women are made in the mold of the mother and should be like treated as such. It's like, dude, you're a hypocrite, piece of crap,
total
murderer,
hypocrite, piece of crap, murderer. Yeah, he just like can't keep himself in check. It's like, no respect for Kristen Cole, that's for sure. No respect.
Yeah.
But, so many other respectable characters, though.
Larys Strong. Larys Strong is the other. Oh, you want to go to respectable
Wait, what about Larys Strong?
I don't want to.
Oh, let's go.
Another character that I'm not a huge fan of, Larys. He's, and, I mean, I don't know. This is something that kind of came to mind for me watching some of the episodes of House of the Dragon, where it felt like there are a few things just done for shock value still, which I feel like we should be past by now. I'm talking Larys foot fetish. Is like, was that necessary?
Yeah, Larys
does that really add anything? Like, I think that's in there. I think that also the completely unaddressed Aegon, like, I don't know what I can and can't say on the podcast here, but, taking care of himself
at the window.
In the window. I was like, what is that moment? There are a few others. Honestly, I'm also like, can we stop with all the violent birthing scenes? By the last episode, I was like, that's enough. That last one was too much.
That last one was a lot. Very visceral.
Like her like birthing herself, like, and the blood everywhere, and then the like showing the thing over and over again is like, I don't know. That was too much for me, and I also don't know what they were trying to say with it.
Yeah, and they like kept cutting to her dragon. I'm like, what am I supposed to, like? Yeah. That's the one case where I wish that people would tell me what to think, because I'm like, what am I supposed to think?
Well, they were
when I see
that was in the end of the episode, and it still made no sense because they're like, the showrunner kept saying the word battlefield. He was like, I want it to be a battle, like a battlefield, and it's like the person they were talking to, like,
why is the dragon there?
I don't know. It was just about the, like, I don't know. I don't understand it either. I just feel like after the show it was just like being violent. I don't know. Point being, it didn't make any sense. I don't know what they were trying to say too, because it's like it's almost like it seemed like it was supposed to be in contrast to all the women who died during childbirth. And then it's like, look how strong Rhaenyra is because she didn't die during childbirth. And it's like, that does not make all those other women like weak.
No.
Or something that like makes Rhaenyra like stronger or more resilient than them. Like that's just a messed up thing that happened to them.
See how you could maybe go there. I don't think that was the intention. The show is
I know, but it's
so not trying to do that, though.
But it doesn't. I know it's not the intention, but what is the intention?
That is an excellent question. I mean,
everything should be done with some intention. I'm sorry that I'm trying to read into things that are chosen to happen during a show and take up like huge portions of the finale. I know. I'm just, I don't know. That it bothered me because it was gross. It was hard to watch, and I'm just like, it was enough.
I'm not bothered by gross things, but I was watching this. I was like, part of me was like, so what? like so what?
Jeez, takes a lot to move the needle for Charles. He's watching.
The majority, like
pour out of a
90% of me was like,
dead fetus.
This is wild. But the other part of me is like, why is this happening? Like, what is the point? It didn't change Rhaenyra's character really at all. It didn't change my opinion of her character at all. it didn't change anything for me. It sucked. Like, it seemed like Rhaenyra was in all bad sorts, and it's kind of interesting to see the war room going on while she's not there trying to give birth. And for some, she's like, "I'm doing it myself," and you're like, "Okay, doing what exactly?" And I don't know. It wasn't my favorite scene. I agree with you there. It's like, could that have been edited out for me? Sure. Because at least with the first one, like the C-section in episode 1, as bloody and hard to watch and intense as that was, that said a lot about where Westeros is as a society, where Viserys is as like a decision maker and where his priorities are, and like where women stand, even the most noble of women stand in this society. Like, at least that said a lot. This one, not nearly as impactful. But it's almost, I guess it's like a full circle thing, I guess. Like,
right.
We started bookend. There's your bookend right
also,
there. Yeah.
Yeah, but bookends are supposed to be meaningful, and we're supposed to understand why they happened. But sure, we got our bookends in some way. But
Rhaenyra survived.
Okay. I mean,
and she did it herself with no man, no help. Like,
yeah, Daemon not really showing up in those moments for.
Damon's like, hey, if it's not going to work out, she'll just go to her dragon and get killed alive. I've seen it before.
Right. These things happen.
Yeah, right. So I guess there's some progress to be made here, where it was like, where the queen at the time in episode 1 didn't get a choice and was killed to try and save this male baby. Like, Rhaenyra was able to take control of it and have her own agency about it, and was able to survive. Maybe you could argue that there's some sort of progression there. Is it strong or worth showing on TV to 20 million people? I would maybe argue the case no, but I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from with it. It's like the queen in episode 1, she didn't know like what the mace, like they were all talking on the side and she was getting all this help and she wasn't sure what was happening, and then they just cut her open and ripped this baby out. It's like, whoa. But in this one, they're like, let us help you, and she's like, no, stay away, I got this. And in some way, this was Rhaenyra's biggest fear. She never wanted to be married, she never wanted to have kids, and now here she is married twice with, this is the 6th time she's given birth. So in some ways, she got railroaded by society, but in other ways she's standing up for herself. I guess literally in this case, giving birth. And I guess that's what we're supposed to glean from it. I guess there is some sort of agency and empowerment out of that, even though it is very tragic at the same time and hardcore. Like, it is kind of like speaks to her like conviction and her I guess, for lack of a better word, her power to be able to survive something like that. But yeah, like you said, it's shaky ground.
But yeah, and it goes back then to, if she's so powerful that she can survive that, what does that mean about the people who did it?
Yeah, so it's shaky ground.
I mean, I'm not gonna keep trying to try that. It's just when it's unclear why it's happening, you start looking for, okay, what are they trying to say? And none of the answers seem so great or interesting. And I'll also say,
oof.
Yeah,
take that, showrunners.
Yeah, I'm sure they're an hour and a half into our episode. They care so much.
Oh yeah, they're crying right now.
Say, I don't think they made it past when you were like, I don't think he knows. I wonder if he's seen any Hitchcock films, because I don't think he knows what that word means.
I just picture the showrunner in his brown leather jacket, like that Woody Harrelson scene in Zombieland, where he dots his tears with wads of money.
Right. That's exactly what's happening.
I think that's what's happening right now.
Yeah. Right. So. Anyway, that's enough on the things that we're getting all critical about here. Maybe we can zoom out a bit and try to put a bow on this by talking about the season overall. I think that I came out. This is maybe the tweet that you're referring to, Charles, or you referred to earlier, where you know where I stand. I just felt like this whole season exceeded my expectations that like coming in anything in my wildest imagination of how much I would enjoy a Game of Thrones prequel. I was a little bit in Jon Snow mode around it after do you know where I'm going?
I don't want to.
After exactly. After Game of Thrones season 8 was so tragically disappointing, I was a little, and then they were like, we're gonna have a bazillion spin-off shows. I was a little bit like, I don't want it.
I don't want
But
it.
I don't want it, my queen.
My queen.
But
MUH. My
I,
queen.
yeah, sometimes, sometimes I'm like, we gotta just let things die when they're over, especially we don't want to keep resuscitating something that's going to make it even worse. And I felt that a little bit at the end of season 8. But so this is coming back, and it'd been enough time where I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to give it a shot. I'm ready. And I think that was a lot of people coming in. They're like, I'll give it a shot. And I think they blew me away overall. I'm captivated. I'm interested. I want to know where this is going. I can't wait for season 2. And I just was not expecting to have such a positive reaction to it. I thought I'd be a lot more mixed. And they didn't. I thought they might phone it in,
Right.
honestly, with this show. I thought they might make it a cash grab. We know we can get Game of Thrones viewers to come back, enough of them to make some money. I didn't think they were going to make a show of this quality. So just, for all the crap we're giving the showrunners, because we know they're listening. We know they've been dabbing at their eyes with all that cash money.
Yeah.
They really did a phenomenal job to bring so much life into this story and bring us back into the Game of Thrones universe in a way that is so exciting.
Couldn't agree more, Dylan. To me, there was so much kind of stacked against this. It's like a Game of Thrones spin-off all these years later, after the fans have a sour taste in their mouth. Like, no one asked for this show, no one asked for it. And like, here it is, and I'm just so impressed by how much they were able to accomplish. It's not easy to make a show like this. Like, how many times have we seen it, even in like take Star Wars, for example. They make a million spin-off shows. Some are great successes, some are misses, and like the creativity of trying to make a prequel while still having a fresh original story and new characters, with the pressure of inserting famous characters, like that weighs heavy on a production, and this show is able to go right past that. You have something like the Lord of the Rings show, which is another hot property, all the money in the world thrown at it to make this beautiful looking show, but still totally eclipsed in terms of characters and performance and writing of this show. So it's like, you could have all the money in the world and still make a lukewarm show. You could have all of the intellectual property.
Please don't say Luke right now, Charles. I mean, a little too soon, especially lukewarm. At least he didn't die by dragon fire. Then it would have been in really poor taste to say lukewarm.
That would have been an amazing joke, though, if only I got such a setup.
Right.
But
yeah,
and then to speak about Luke, I'm also talking about Star Wars too. It's like you'd have the greatest IP in the world and still mess it up. So nothing was guaranteed for this show at all, and I'm sure the Vegas odds were stacked against it for a lot of the fans anyway, and yet they were able to deliver like just a really great show. Like, sure, it's not without some of the things I roll my eyes at, with like over explaining metaphors and trying to give heroic moments to characters that have that make you kind of think twice. But for the most part, like, I love that they stuck intimately with these characters and they weren't afraid to make these risky, I think they're very risky choices of time skipping and recasting in one season, like not even like from season 1 to 2, like within the first season you're doing all of this. And it was a huge accomplishment. I don't know how they pulled it off, but I'm very impressed and I'm very happy for it. And I'm very appreciative for it because I love Game of Thrones. I love the world of Westeros, and no one's really been interested in having that conversation for years now since Game of Thrones ended. And to like have it be at the front of the conversation again is super exciting. And I was watching a live stream the other day and people were talking about all these different characters, and you realize how complex the relationships they've built in this season really are, and how vast like the family trees go and the political intrigues go. And it's such a strong foundation for this show. I think it's going to continue to knock it out of the park in season 2, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited, and I'm like, do we read Fire and Blood now? Like, is that something we do in preparation for season 2? I wouldn't mind at all.
Yeah, I gotta think about it. I really like seeing stuff for the first time in the form of a show. Like that moment with what really drove that home for me was the Luke
suspense
moment, I think, at the end. Yeah, where it's like, I too was like, he's gonna go, and this is gonna be the thing that really kicks off the war. But they did kind of take me a little bit for a ride. I was like, oh,
yeah, they did.
And I was like, I don't know. I was like, he's got to die now, or it's a cop out. That's how I felt when they set that whole thing up. I was like, he's really going to escape, and it's going to be like, oh, God, this season ends with, that was a close one. I was like, they got to
seal the deal here.
So, yeah, it's one of those weird moments where, like, you like a character and you're rooting for them to live because you like them, but you're also, from a writing perspective and an entertainment perspective, you're kind of rooting for the show to have the willingness to make it happen, to just end it. And obviously they're drawing from that source material of Fire and Blood, so they were always gonna do it. But I like the idea, for me anyway, of being like witnessing these things in front of me visually, and especially because Fire and Blood is written like a historical account. I just don't think you get those exciting moments the way that you get it. I could be wrong, reach out to us if you've read Fire and Blood and you find it just as exciting. But reading this like inscription of, hey, this event happened historically and that set off the war.
Yeah,
to me, that's
Aemon killed Luke, but then you get the subtleties of the accident and like the fight scene, and like, oh, maybe he got away, like that. I agree. So I don't know, it's a fine line we'll have to try and walk. I mean, after the first season of Game of Thrones aired, I read all the books at the time. I don't regret it at all. Maybe it's different in this case because it's not like a story narrative as much as it is like a historical record. So I don't know, but I think it's worth looking into at least. Like you said, I don't want the show ruined because I read factually like Aemon kills Luke and I'm like, oh well, now I know. But I don't know. We'll have to think about it. But for now, the show's given us a lot to talk about. We are maxing out on time. Is there anything else we want to say before we play that sweet, sweet outro music?
Bees in the chat.
Bees in the chat. Bees in the chat. Well said.
But let's get that sweet, sweet outro music buzzing, Charles.
Oh, let's get that music buzzing. Thank you, everyone, one and all, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. If you like what you heard today, if you want to see what all the buzz is about, feel free to follow us over on social media. That's at the FTF Podcast with the number 1 at the end on Twitter, and at the FTF Podcast on Instagram. Now, Dylan, if they like what they heard today, they follow us on social media, and they want to support the show even further, what can they do?
toss 5 stars to our podcast, which you can now do on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Over half of you are listening on Spotify. It's just 2 clicks to throw us those 5 stars. So if you're enjoying all our discussions here, that's a wonderful thing to do. And you can even write a review alongside that rating on Apple Podcasts. That would be incredible. It helps people find our show and see what we're about. But just listening is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you all so much for listening. We greatly appreciate it. You all the best. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.